When most people check in on their retirement plan, they're typically only looking for one thing, and that is their account balance. And if it looks good, they just assume everything else must be fine. Folks, the problem is that some of the most dangerous risks in retirement don't really show up on your statement at all. What we're talking about here are things like taxes or the timing of what's happening in your life. Income decisions, healthcare costs, all of these different things that can quietly derail an otherwise successful retirement plan, often years after certain decisions are made. Hello and welcome back to Retire Stronger, episode 44. Bill, say hello to everybody. It's good to be back with you today.
John, good to be with you as well. Hope you're doing well.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope you had a good week or so since I last saw you on the podcast. And I know today we're going to be talking about a bit of an interesting topic that seems to, I don't know if it plagues a lot of the people that we work with, but it's definitely something that seems to come up more often than not. And that is the hidden retirement risks that don't show up on your statement. So folks, what do we mean by that? Well, when most people check in on their retirement plan, they're typically only looking for one thing, and that is their account balance. Or maybe they're looking at their performance number for the year or for the month or for the quarter. And if it looks good, they just assume everything else must be fine. Well, folks, the problem is that some of the most dangerous risks in retirement don't really show up on your statement at all. And what we're talking about here are things like taxes or the timing of what's happening in your life, income decisions, healthcare costs, all of these different things that can quietly derail an otherwise successful retirement plan, often years after certain decisions are made. So today we're going to kind of pull back the curtain, peel back the onion, the layers of the onion on these different hidden risks that don't really show up on your statement, but absolutely will show up in retirement. And more importantly, what you should be thinking about before it's too late. So again, Bill, welcome. I know this is going to be an interesting and fun topic to kind of go through today, so I'll let you get us started off.
Yeah, it sounds good, John. When you talk about peeling back the layers of an onion, it reminds me of a famous quote from the famous sitcom Seinfeld from the 90s. If there's any Seinfeld fans out there, hello to you all. When George Costanza told Jerry about the peeling the layers of an onion. And he said, the one thing about peeling the layers of an onion, Jerry, the more you peel it, the more it stinks. And that's really what we find here. The more you kind of peel back the layers of what is going on actually inside of a portfolio or inside of what people might have as their understanding of their plan, sometimes it's not as pretty as people think it is. And let's start with maybe jumping right in the deep end here and talk about tax concentration, because I think that might be the biggest misconception inside of a portfolio, where people look at their account, their 401k, for example, which is your employer-sponsored plan at work, and they look at the balance and they feel really good about the balance inside the 401k. But one thing you have to remember about having a 401k balance is that not all of that money is yours. As a matter of fact, what you have done since you had started contributing to a 401k plan at work, and assuming that you're deferring paying taxes on the money that you put into that account, is you have entered into a relationship with the IRS.
Correct.
And the relationship goes like this. You have agreed to not pay tax on the money that you put into the account, assuming that it's the pre-tax portion of a 401k. And in exchange for that, you're going to get a tax deduction each year that you can take on your taxes. However, at a later date in the future, the IRS is going to require that you start taking money out of that account through what are called required minimum distributions. And currently the age for required minimum distributions is 73. And by 2031, that's supposed to increase to age 75. So what you have to remember is that a percentage of what's inside that account is not actually yours. It's actually the IRS's. The good news is that you get to take on all of the risk and all of the investment decisions yourself. The IRS assumes no risk in this relationship. However, they are going to take a chunk out of it. So keep that in mind, that is a big part of this, and that the term tax deferred, just because you haven't paid tax on it now, does not mean that this is tax free. It's far from it. Tax free is a totally separate category. And as a matter of fact, if you want to keep this simple, there's essentially 3 environments that your money can exist as part of taxes and the way the IRS looks at it. That would be taxable accounts, tax deferred, and tax free. Those are basically the 3 areas that we look at. And the key component for those 3 areas is that you want balance. You want to have the correct amounts in the correct types of accounts to actually optimize your tax situation. And John, I know you can probably say this as well from your experience. I can tell you that to a man, to a woman, generally the best savers, the people who have been able to accumulate the most in their accounts, actually are the ones that have the biggest tax problem. So being a really good accumulator doesn't necessarily equate to understanding how taxes are going to affect that account later on in the future. So I would leave you with this as part of the tax concentration piece here. It's more about where, when, and how your money is going to be taxed, as opposed to just how much do I have. Those are as important questions to answer for your future as they are looking at your account balance and looking at your account performance. Would you agree, or what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no, the only thing I would add is one, I completely agree with what you just said. And 2, we see it a lot. I have a client right now in his mid-40s, has done very well accumulating assets in his company 401k plan. And by all accounts, is with respect to how he views it, he has, done very well for accumulating and saving for retirement, but has ignored the fact that he has entered into a massive, partnership with the IRS, like you spoke about a few minutes ago. And, you don't really think about it. You go along, year after year, just plugging away, pumping money into these 401k plans on the deferred side, the pre-tax side. And, you just kind of put it on a set it and forget it scenario, and you just keep putting money in and keep putting money in, and you're just continuing to build and build and build this massive tax bomb that can come back and haunt you later in life, especially, in your pre-retirement or retirement years, specifically when you start taking income. So, the only thing I would just say is I would reiterate what you mentioned is you've got to plan appropriately so that you have the right amounts of money saved in the right locations. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, that asset location is very key and crucial to a successful retirement plan. And that kind of leads us into kind of what I wanted to talk about next, which is basically, timing and sequence risk. And we've talked about sequence of return risks on multiple occasions on this podcast. And so, basically, what is it we like to say, Bill, that accumulation math does not equal distribution math?
Exactly.
So, in your early retirement years, downturns can permanently damage your income strategy. So, that speaks directly to sequence of return risks. So you have to be careful about that. And if you're, kind of relating it back to the tax issue, if all of your assets are in a pre-tax environment, whether it's a 401k plan that's pre-tax or in a traditional IRA, and you have a significant downturn in your early years of retirement, now you've got less assets and you still are paying taxes on those every time you take a distribution. So it just further deteriorates what you've worked so hard and so long to save. Withdrawals and volatility, when there's significant volatility, I should say, it really does kind of change everything. It changes the game, and it could force you to have to make major adjustments to your overall income plan. So timing can be something that can significantly hurt you. It can significantly help you. It just depends on what's happening in the market and if there's major volatility to the downside. Also, I think that what we see a lot of times is clients focusing on average returns. This is a big one for us. Average returns really don't tell the whole story. Matter of fact, they can tell a very inaccurate story with how you're performing and how your accounts are doing. So I think that just only paying attention to average returns is the wrong way to look at it. I would say that compounded average growth rate is a way more accurate way of looking at how you're performing and how you're doing in your portfolio. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. I would say also from a timing and sequence risk scenario, your planning focus, especially for your retirement income strategy, you really need to focus on matching up your money to specific time horizons, and that would be something that a lot of folks just do not really think about as they're just in that main accumulation phase of their life. And I don't know if I missed anything there. Feel free to kind of chime in and add your 2 cents, but that's kind of how I look at it when I'm thinking from a timing and sequence risk scenario.
Yeah, no, and I think the average returns piece there is one of the things that triggered in my mind. I know there's the example we use in office sometimes to explain average returns versus actual returns, where you can use the coin. It's hard to do this, I guess, on a podcast, but you can set the coins out in front of you. And there's a way to show you where we could legally say that you achieved a 25% average return on your account when in reality, your net return was zero.
Yeah, I mean, I can just verbalize it, right? If you start off with $100,000 in your investment account, and at the end of the first year, the account lost 50% of value, you're now down to $50,000. And then in the end of year 2, if your account made 100% return, again, folks, this is hypothetical and just an example, but if your account made 100% return, now you're back to break even. Your account value is now worth what you started with at the beginning of year 1. And then let's just rinse and repeat that. Let's say you lost 50% again, you're back down to $50K. In the 4th year, you make another 100% and you're back up to $100,000. Now, most people listening to this are going to think to themselves, well, goodness, okay, I started with 100K at the beginning of year 1 and I finished year 4 with 100K. I haven't made any money. But when you do the math, the average return for that scenario is a 25% positive return on average, which is just mind-boggling. But that is how average return works. And that's why it's crucial not to concentrate, not to focus on the average return, but more so on the compound average growth rate, which in this scenario would be 0. So
in your example, John, what would happen is as the client is running out of your office, having fired you, you can yell at them, hey, but your average return was 25%. Isn't that great?
Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
That's how you use average return in our environment. It's right there when you're about to get fired. That's when you tell them, but hey, the average return was 25%. Talk about some fuzzy math. That's crazy. And that's why obviously average return is not really what we want to be looking at. But people talk about average return all the time. And it's dangerous to focus on that because it's probably not actually the direction you're going or want to be going with your account. So from that, John, let's talk about the next invisible risk here. When people open their statement at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month, there isn't a line item on there that says, hey, check your income strategy. Warning lights flashing. Your income strategy is insufficient. Your income strategy is inefficient. No, it's not there, right? And just because you have a number of different income sources, that does not mean that you actually have an income strategy. You might just have a bunch of pieces of income in retirement that are all over the place. Now, that's great. A lot of times, all it takes is just some organization on those income sources to figure out what is the best way to optimize them. I'll give you a couple of examples. What's the biggest one out there that's an income source? Social Security, right? Yep. Social Security is the number one thing that people want to talk about as it relates to income. And why is because Social Security in their mind, in our minds, is considered a guaranteed source of income. And we can laugh. You can insert the punchline here for whatever you want to related to Social Security. But as of right now, for folks who are retiring, it is a guaranteed source of income. It is akin to a pension for them. So then the question becomes, well, when should I take this? When should I start Social Security? Obviously, the decisions on when you take Social Security and turning it on, those become permanent. So it's a big decision to make. Pension elections are the same way. That can impact your spouse. It's not just considerations for you. It impacts others in your family. And then on top of all of that, you've got inflation, which is a silent killer, right? It's a silent tax that you didn't vote for, but it erodes the safe income that you have because oftentimes, Social Security is tied to a cost of living adjustment, but that cost of living adjustment calculation may not actually be reality of what you're seeing for the things you need to purchase, right?
Yeah,
it may not be keeping up in that area.
Not.
No, it's not. So it's off of a different calculation. And so you might look at it and say, well, my expenses went up by 5% this year. Your cost of living adjustment's not going up by 5%, most likely. So the key here is, how do you create dependable income sources that are tax efficient? And when do you turn them on? And how do you stagger them? And how much of the income that you have do you want to turn into guaranteed sources of income? There are a number of folks who are very comfortable just drawing from their investment account. We would consider that a variable source of income. We can make that work. There are a lot of folks who look at that cash flow analysis and they say, well, I'd really like to have 100% of this income guaranteed. And that way the rest of my investments are kind of my quote unquote slush fund. I can go do things with that beyond the expenses. So the income strategy gaps are critically important. Clearly, there's not going to be anything on your monthly statement that talks about the inefficiencies or just having a plain insufficient income fund. It's not going to be something that you find on that particular statement, John, unless you know something different about that.
No, and to further this part of the discussion here, I mean, back to the very first thing we talked about, which was taxes. I mean, there's nothing on your statement either saying, hey, the income you're getting from this source that or this investments, these investments that you have, when you start drawing income, this is going to have a major impact on your tax bill. This is going to bump you into a higher tax bracket. There's nothing on there talking about that, right? There's no warning. There's no disclaimer saying, hey, before you decide to take an income from this account, be sure you're looking at your tax scenario, your tax liability, to make sure you're not bumping yourself into a higher tax. So yeah, I mean, these are all things that need to be considered that most people are just not thinking about. And can you blame them? We're all busy. Most of our clients are either small business owners or, highly paid individuals that are busy with their day-to-day job. And when they get home, they have their family, they have kids, they're going to sports activities, they're traveling, just trying to enjoy their downtime. They're not coming home and going to say, okay, my first thing I need to do today when I get home from work is look at my statement and determine what type of tax situations I've gotten myself into and how to avoid those things. Or, where are my income gaps and which pension election should I take? When should I start Social Security? None of those things are really on people's minds. And that is where a qualified professional, someone you trust, that can do some solid financial planning work for you, can help you identify those things and bridge those gaps and piece those things together in a manner that will create a much more efficient plan of action when the day comes that you're ready to retire and start receiving the income off of what you've saved. So yeah, all valid points. And it's something that we see probably more often than what we would want to, but I guess that's why we enjoy what we're doing.
John, speak for yourself on this. I mean, in our household, we talk about tax optimization at the dinner table. I assume everyone else did that too. Is that not how it works?
Oh, it's too funny. Yeah.
We don't even talk about it. We don't want to talk about it at the end of the day. But even if we did want to talk about it at the end of the day, that's not what anyone talks about at the dinner table. You don't light the fireplace behind us here and put on your smoking jacket and pull out your statements and figure out where the tax inefficiencies are. It's just not how we operate with these types of things.
Absolutely.
And it's understandable.
And it's also very rare to talk about the next kind of invisible risk that we wanted to bring up, which is, protecting yourself from blind spots. Nowhere on your statement does it say, hey, make sure you have considered your healthcare and long-term care needs and financial risks and any type of medical issues that you may be facing when you get into retirement. Doesn't bring that up, doesn't talk about that, doesn't give you any type of guidance or advice when you're looking at your statement. Healthcare and long-term care as financial risks, these can be a huge liability for you as you get into retirement. The older we get, the more these things become an issue. And typically what we find is most folks are not even considering it or even thinking about it until it's almost too late, until maybe something major happens to them. Maybe they have a major event. And maybe that major event comes at a much younger age than what they thought it would happen. And that gets people thinking probably earlier than what they normally would. But typically it's, they're not thinking about this until they get into their actual retirement years, and they all of a sudden are going to their doctor, and they're more often than they ever thought they would. And things are cropping up, things are happening. And a lot of times you get to that point, it's almost too late to properly plan. So these are things that you want to think about, liability risk, outdated coverages, what protections do you have in place? Is long-term care insurance something you need? Is it something that you don't care about? Is there a way to implement that in an efficient manner? These are all things that I feel like, should be a pillar of your planning. And if you plan appropriately for that, it can pay huge dividends for how your retirement income plan plays out in the future. So it's just something to think about. Bill, anything you want to add on that piece?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we want to come together now on some takeaways from this as we close out this particular session. And, one of them that we haven't really said, but it's kind of been implied here, is that retirement isn't about trying to beat the market. We're not trying to outperform the S&P 500. Now, there are certain circumstances where people will say, well, I want to set an account aside and I want to be more aggressive with that. But what we're talking about is the entire portfolio. We don't want to put the entire portfolio in a place where we need to beat the market, because that's not really the way the mindset should probably work when we're in retirement as it relates to the longevity of your assets, especially early in retirement. I'm thinking here about what you talked about earlier with the sequence of return portion. You are much more sensitive to the actual returns on your investments in the early years of your retirement than you are in the later years of your retirement. So certainly in the early years, that careful focus on where you're positioned, how you're positioned, the amount of risk that you're taking overall in the entire portfolio is critical there. It really also, John, like we said earlier, it's about the coordination on taxes and income and your investments and protection, right? What you were just talking about related to long-term care. Long-term care insurance it's not health insurance. It's more asset protection. It's more asset insurance. And so it may not be right for everyone. And there may be alternative ways to come up with a plan on how to protect your assets or protect your spouse, for example, and the assets that are remaining so that they're not drained away from a long-term care event. And I hope that one of the other takeaways from this is that if you only look at your statements and consider the returns, you're doing yourself an injustice. You're probably missing some of the real risks that are inside your portfolio. So that's kind of the takeaways that I get from this. I know there's some you wanted to share and kind of close us out, but that's kind of where we went, and I hope that resonates.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. And folks, if you found this episode to be helpful, if it resonated with you in any way, shape, or form, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, forward this episode to a friend or family member or colleague. And if you want to learn more about how we work with our clients, feel free to give us a call at 704-469-0200. Also, you can email us at info@crownadvisorgroup.com or go to our website at crownadvisorgroup.com and hit that button to schedule some time to speak with us or peruse the variety of other offerings within our site. We have a lot of our podcasts are updated regularly, so feel free to have access to them there. But we appreciate you being with us today. Let us know if we can be of help, and we certainly look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bill, thank you again for joining me, and we'll talk soon.